You got the job interview, then showed up late. You met someone great, then stopped texting back. This isn't laziness. Your subconscious is protecting you from becoming who you actually could be. Think about that for a moment. Not from some distant theoretical place, but from the last time it happened to you, because it has happened to you. Maybe it was the project you'd been working toward for months. Everything was lining up. And then, the night before the deadline, you stayed up watching videos until 3 in the morning instead of finishing, or the relationship that was finally going well, really well, and you picked a fight about something that didn't matter. Or the diet, the business idea, the creative work. You were closer than you'd ever been, and something inside you reached for the emergency brake. We do this constantly. We work toward the things we say we want, and then, right at the threshold, we turn around. We procrastinate. We self-medicate. We ghost. We pick fights. We forget. We suddenly decide it probably wasn't meant to be. And the strange part, the part that should tell you something, is that the sabotage is proportional to the stakes. The things we ruin most reliably are the things we care about most deeply. And the story we tell ourselves afterward is always the same. I'm lazy. I lack discipline. I'm just not built for that kind of success. But what if that story is wrong? What if the engine of self-sabotage isn't weakness at all, but a kind of terrible, misguided protection? The standard explanation for self-sabotage goes something like this. You lack willpower. You need more discipline. You need a better morning routine, a stricter schedule, an accountability partner. The problem is you. Try harder. This is the explanation offered by most productivity culture, most self-help books, and most of the people in your life who have never struggled with it. And it sounds reasonable until you notice something strange. The people who sabotage themselves are often not lazy. They're often driven, capable, even talented. They don't fail at everything. They fail specifically at the things that matter most to them. A person can show up flawlessly at a job they don't care about and completely fall apart the moment something real is at stake. That's not a discipline problem. That's a precision problem. The sabotage is targeted. It strikes exactly where you're most invested, most vulnerable, most exposed, which means it isn't random. It isn't entropy. Something is choosing where to strike. And that something lives in the part of your mind you don't have easy access to. Carl Jung spent much of his life mapping the territory of the unconscious. And one of his most enduring ideas is the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we've pushed out of awareness, not destroyed, not resolved, just hidden. Most people understand the shadow as the dark side, the anger you won't admit to, the jealousy you pretend you don't feel, the selfishness you've learned to mask with politeness. And that's part of it. But Jung said something that most people miss. The shadow doesn't only contain what you consider bad, it also contains what you consider too good. Your ambition, your brilliance, your capacity for joy, your power. If at some point in your development you learned that these qualities were dangerous, that they provoked envy, or punishment, or abandonment, then you buried them alongside the rage and the shame. Jung put it plainly. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not the worst of yourself, all of yourself, including the parts that could change everything. This is what makes self-sabotage so confusing. You're not just running from failure. You're running from the full weight of your own potential. Because potential, once acknowledged, demands something of you. It demands that you stop hiding, that you step forward, that you become visible, accountable, and exposed to the possibility that you might succeed, and then have to keep going. In 2009, psychologist Hendricks introduced a concept that put a name to what Jung described. He called it the upper limit problem. The idea is deceptively simple. Each of us has an internal thermostat, not for temperature, but for how much success, happiness, and aliveness we allow ourselves to feel. This thermostat was set early, mostly in childhood, mostly without our knowledge. And it functions like any thermostat. When the temperature exceeds the set point, the system kicks in to bring it back down. You get a promotion, and within a week you've started a conflict with your partner. You have 3 incredible days in a row, and on the 4th you wake up convinced something terrible is about to happen. You finish the manuscript, then leave it in a drawer for 2 years. Hendricks argues this isn't coincidence. It's regulation. Your nervous system has a set point for how much good you can tolerate before it feels unsafe. And the moment you cross that line, your unconscious generates a crisis, an argument, a bout of anxiety, a sudden impulse to burn it all down, to bring you back to familiar territory. Back to the level of happiness your system recognizes as normal. Even if that normal is miserable. Even if that normal is years below what you're capable of. The cruelty of this mechanism is its invisibility. You don't experience it as self-sabotage, you experience it as the argument being real. The anxiety being justified, the impulse being rational. Your unconscious doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a notification that says you are now exceeding your programmed limit for happiness. It just makes you feel, with absolute conviction, that something is wrong, that you need to stop, that this was a mistake. And you listen, because the feeling is indistinguishable from truth. So where does the set point come from? Mostly from the first environment where you learned what was safe, your family. For many people, childhood was a place where certain things were subtly or not so subtly made dangerous. If you grew up with a parent who was threatened by your intelligence, you learned that being smart meant losing love. If you were punished for being loud, for taking up space, for wanting too much, then your nervous system recorded a simple equation. Visibility equals danger. Success equals isolation. Joy equals the moment just before something is taken away. These lessons don't require dramatic trauma. They can be installed by a single repeated phrase. Who do you think you are? Don't get too big for your boots. Things like that don't happen to people like us. Or simply by the absence of celebration, by growing up in a home where accomplishment was met with silence, where no one modeled what it looks like to receive good things without flinching. You didn't need to be told explicitly that success was dangerous. You just needed to notice, once or twice, that when you shined, someone you loved went dark. Your body remembers all of it. Not as a narrative you can articulate, but as a felt sense, a tightness in your chest when things go too well, a restlessness when life gets quiet, an almost physical need to introduce chaos when stability starts to settle in. This is what people mean when they say they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They aren't being pessimistic. They're describing a neurological reality. Their system was trained to expect punishment after pleasure, loss after gain. And when the punishment doesn't come on its own, the system manufactures it. We talk constantly about the fear of failure. Entire industries are built around helping you overcome it. But the deeper, quieter, more destructive fear, the one that actually drives most self-sabotage, is the fear of success. Not success as an abstraction, success as a lived reality with all its implications. Success means change. If you get the thing you want, your life will be different. Your relationships will shift. Some people will treat you differently, and not all of them will be happy for you. You'll be visible in a way you weren't before. Visible means exposed. Exposed means vulnerable. Success means responsibility. If you prove you can do it, you'll be expected to keep doing it. The bar doesn't reset. It rises. The pressure doesn't end. It compounds. You can no longer hide behind, "I haven't really tried yet." That excuse, and it is an exquisite excuse, one of the best ever invented, is gone forever. Once you succeed, the world sees you differently, and you can never go back to being invisible. And perhaps most terrifying of all, success means you could lose it. Failure, for all its pain, has a perverse stability. You know what failure feels like. You've survived it. You've built a self around it. But success? Success introduces a new possibility, the possibility of falling from a height. And your unconscious, in its blunt and ancient calculus, concludes that the safest way to avoid a devastating fall is never to climb. So you don't. You stay at base camp. You tell yourself the mountain wasn't worth climbing anyway. Now, a necessary correction. Because there is a version of this framework that becomes its own trap. Not every act of quitting is self-sabotage. Not every abandoned project is shadow material. Sometimes you leave a relationship because it genuinely isn't right. Sometimes you quit the job because the job was destroying you. Sometimes the thing you thought you wanted turns out, upon closer inspection, to be something you were told to want by your parents, your culture, your feed. The danger of the self-sabotage framework is that it can be weaponized against your own discernment. It can make you distrust every instinct to walk away. It can keep you in situations that are actually harmful, because you've been convinced that discomfort always means growth and leaving always means fear. That's not wisdom. That's a different kind of cage. So discernment matters. The question isn't, am I sabotaging myself, as if the answer is always yes. The question is more precise. Is this decision moving me towards something or away from something? Am I leaving because I've genuinely reconsidered? Or am I leaving because I got close enough to feel the heat and my old programming kicked in? The honest answer requires stillness. It requires sitting with the discomfort long enough to tell the difference between intuition and fear, between the quiet voice that says this isn't right for you and the panicked voice that says you're not right for this. They sound almost identical, and that distinction, that pause between stimulus and response, is the entire practice. So what do you do with all of this? The temptation is to go to war with your shadow, to treat self-sabotage as an enemy to be conquered through sheer force of will. But this is the same mistake the productivity culture makes, trying to override a part of yourself that is, in its own confused and outdated way, trying to keep you safe. Jung didn't say destroy the shadow, he said integrate it, bring it into the light, not to defeat it, but to understand it, to sit with the part of you that is terrified of what you could become and say, I hear you, I know you're trying to protect me, but I don't need this protection anymore. The goal isn't to eliminate the inner thermostat. It's to raise it, slowly, deliberately, with compassion for the part of yourself that learned long ago that the safest thing was to stay small. Ask the question that your unconscious doesn't want you to ask. What am I protecting myself from? Not in the abstract. Specifically, what would happen if I actually finished the book? What would change if I let this relationship work? What would I have to face if I stopped failing on purpose? The answer, almost always, is the thing you need most. The success you're avoiding isn't random. It's specific. It's the exact thing that would require you to update your identity, to stop being the person who almost made it and start being the person who did. And that is terrifying. Not because you can't do it, but because you can. Because you have always been able to, and some part of you has always known. The examined life asks you to look at everything, including the parts of yourself that would rather stay hidden. Self-sabotage is not your enemy, it's a message. And the message is always the same. You are closer than you think. That's exactly why you're afraid.